Welcome to the next update for Warpath. Today's update is a little bit different than usual. Instead of actually showing you what's going on in Warpath, I'm going to show you another project file that I'm working on for a side project to help Warpath. So last week when I revamped the configuration system and made it to where you could store everything in JSON, the files and the configuration showed just how complex everything was, and it was really kind of a mess of some legacy code. Um, and I mentioned in last week's video that I wanted to revamp certain aspects of it still. I decided that the best way to do that was, instead of actually going through and ripping out old code and rewriting it inside the actual game, that I would develop a standalone package for turrets and essentially replace the existing turrets with this new standalone package. So I started last night on developing this turret system with a primary emphasis on ease of configuration. So it's very free and open, and it's easy to set up, and it has very few limitations for the developer or the designer who's configuring a ship. The potential is that I may actually be able to release this turret system out on the asset store at some point. So it's come along quite quickly. It's got a long ways to go. I definitely have a path forward, but let's get on and show you what I've got. Alright, so we've got a single target out in the distance, and I've just go ahead and hard-coded all of the turrets to target that target. And it's moving around randomly, but I've got it confined in a box so it won't leave the screen area. So if you ever see it stop moving in a particular direction, it's because it's hit its bounding box. So I've got 4 different turret configurations here. So the one on the right is essentially a railgun. The next one here, the second one from the right, is more like 2 miniguns. And the next one here is a stacked rocket launcher. So it fires 4 rockets. Those are unguided. And then finally, at long last, something that Warpath does not yet have, and that is homing missiles. So this one here on this side produces homing missiles. So starting from the right here, let's go ahead and fire off one of these puppies. I made contact and the target started to move. So if I press and hold, I've only got one. So one of the features, just like in Warpath, but now it's actually easier to configure, you have full automatic and semi-automatic modes. So this is a semi-auto, and it is tracking the target, looking at its direction it's heading, and leading the target as necessary to try to hit. Again, not perfect. You don't want it to be perfect. It also has the error system that I introduced in Warpath's guns. So it has some variable accuracy that can be upgraded. Second, we got a fully automatic auto gun, and it's tracking the target. Again, it's trying to see where the target's going and shooting where it's going. Got fairly fast projectiles. One of the features that's been added into this, that's again not in Warpath, is heat. So I'm going to press and hold this. I'm going to keep my finger down on the fire button, and we'll just start building up some heat. You can't see the heat yet, but enough heat built up that it stopped. As soon as it cools down, my finger's still on the button and it starts firing again. So this is, I mentioned previously, having some way to make it so that you just can't spam a weapon constantly. So the heat system is sort of a tried and true system, and it's configurable. Every single projectile from every barrel contributes to the heat generation. Next, rockets. So since this thing's closer, we might be able to hit it with rockets. And yeah, I made contact. It's amazing. It's actually amazing. Gonna miss on that one. So the accuracy of the tracking is totally configurable. The error of each projectile is configurable. These are the self-propelled uh, projectiles, or it's a projectile type of self-propelled. 1 and 2 are ballistic. And then the last one is the homing missile. So we see, boom, boom, and that hits. So that's the idea. And, you know, you can, let's see if I hit 2 and 4 here. See if I can get some of them to miss. Just fire a whole bunch. Just let everything run. Spam it all. There we go. Got some misses. So the homing missiles, they're trying to find their target. That circle around until they expire. So that's basically the gist of what I've been working on. Just to get into it a little bit, not too deeply, but take you into the behind the scenes. This is that first cannon. So we'll pull this up here. The cannon itself is very simple. Again, the look and feel, the model is totally customizable. So the cannon is broken into the cannon object, which contains everything. That contains an object called the base. The base has a model file, which is where you put the model for your base. The base also contains a gimbal object, which has a model. So there's my gimbal. And then it contains an object for the barrel, which is, of course, my pivot. So the gimbal is the rotation around the y-axis, and the barrel rotates around the x-axis. If it's turned sideways, I have plans to have side-mounted turrets that can rotate sideways, and then the gimbal and the barrel will switch axes as necessary. But that's the basic layout of a turret. And then within the barrel, there's a game object with a mesh renderer. It doesn't matter what kind of mesh it renders. This could be your own custom looking barrel. But as long as there's a mesh renderer here, the turret will bootstrap this. The turret controller will bootstrap this turret and tell it that, oh, this is a barrel. This is one of the barrels that you can shoot from. And you'll notice there are no classes. There's no mono behaviors on any of these objects. It's very easy to configure. There's nothing actually on there. Even on the turret object itself, there's absolutely nothing that tells the system that, hey, this is how you configure me. All of that is handled in the turret controller script. So the turret controller basically has an array of turrets, and so this one controller can control an infinite number, theoretically infinite number, of turrets of the same type. So I could have 10 turrets that all fire this particular ammo. And so what that means is that each turret can have multiple barrels. Like this has multiple barrels and those have multiple barrels. And the same controller can control both types of turrets simultaneously. But all the barrels will be firing the same projectile. So in this case, the cannon projectile is right here. Very simple. There's actually, other than a rigid body and a trail renderer, there's absolutely nothing on this projectile. That's a big improvement from the way it's currently in Warpath, where all of my projectiles have to be very specially rigged because I've got object pooling and I've got other things going on, and there's a ballet of instantiation of classes in order for a projectile to work and to fire. This simplifies things by 300-400%. The range of motion system replaces the firing arcs. They're basically the same concept, except a firing arc only dealt with the arc that you can fire around the y-axis, and so it was two-dimensional only. As you'll notice from the game, or well, I should say from the demo here, that I am tracking this object in three-dimensional space. So this turret system is not just good for a two-dimensional game like Warpath, it's also good in the 3D space. So I definitely wanted to have a system that was more long-term applicable to other things. Um, but yeah, so from here I can configure the range of motion for each of the axes of the turret, what projectile to run, the velocity that that projectile is fired at, its life, time to live, which guidance system it uses, the speed, whether it's fully auto, the rate of fire. So I've got all of the features that Warpath has and more, except for in Warpath, these properties are distributed across about 4 different scriptable object types. So having them all in one configurable object is much easier uh, to manage. And so I'll be able to set up, you know, very complex systems on ships to where every type of weapon of that particular type of weapon is controlled by a single turret controller. Um, so I think it's going to make life a lot easier. Um, I've got multiple things in here. I'm thinking along the futures of potentially selling this on the asset store. So, you know, I'm not assuming that everybody's going to want to use the same type of damage system I'm using. So I'm putting in hooks, um, you know, in information, you know, hovers and things like that to help people configure for their needs. Um, More importantly, the way that I've got it written now, I am preparing for the release of 2018.1 sometime this month, where they will release the entity component system and the job system. And my hope is that I can convert several pieces of this system. If I look at the source code here, I've got several pieces that are currently being handled with MEC, which very can't again I can't say enough good about MEC. More efficient coroutines, um, very good package, very easy to learn, and you know, miles and miles performance-wise ahead of using the default coroutine system in Unity. But with the job system with ECS is actually going to be better theoretically than what MEC can do. So all these things that I'm using MEC for, I have written this particular package to be able to uh, be replaced with the ECS system. So I'm really looking forward to that dropping and getting a chance to implement some of the things in that. For example, my projectile system. I decided against implementing the same object pooling system that I've got in Warpath. And instead, I'm just have a stand-in system that will get replaced with ECS when ECS is available. So I'm not locking myself into a complicated subsystem, to try to have to integrate later. I'll be able to make ECS work within this package and then import this package into Warpath and just replace all of my turrets. So, so that's what's going on, and sort of some fun stuff. So, enjoy. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe.